Hello and welcome everybody to today's TILE Talk. I have the pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Kathleen and Michelle McCartney from LGBT Youth Scotland. And today we're going to hear about the new education report 2023 of Life in Scotland for LGBT young people. It's also LGBT History Month in February, so this month. So we are honored to have both of them here and for them to share the results of this report and their expertise. Now, we are happy for you to share and tweet about this talk on Twitter, and you can use the hashtag Tile Network if you want to do so. Just one request, please, do not share any screenshots of the slides in your tweet and publicly, please. We have a chat going on, so if you have any questions or comments or anything, you can use the chat, and all questions will be picked up by the speakers after their talk. Thank you very much. I'm going to hand over to Michelle and Kathleen.
Hi everyone, I am Kathleen. I use she, her pronouns. I'm going to begin in a moment by talking you through the findings of some of the research that we've carried out recently. But first of all, Michelle, if I share my screen, can I pass over to you for our Safer Space agreement to begin with?
Indeed you can. Hello, I'm Michelle McCartney. I use she, her pronouns, and I am Education Manager at LGBT Youth Scotland. Part of my role is supporting schools, colleges, universities, and informal learning environments to look at the charter and to ensure their policies and guidance is up to date in terms of the young people that work with them or are within their settings. We always use a Safer Space agreement whenever we do anything LGBT in Scotland, and this was co-created with young people, and we use it with our youth work sessions, we use it with charter sessions, we use it in fact with most things that we do for delivery. So I'm just going to go through them today so that we all understand the same guidelines. When we talk about language, today's session is really around how to discuss LGBT topics and specifically the report, but this is a safe space to make mistakes as long as you're being respectful. You're not ever questioning anyone's identity. You're not questioning anybody's validity or anything like that, but it's around asking questions in an appropriate way. It's okay to not know how to approach something as long as you're doing it in a respectful way. Confidentiality and trust is really important for us. Obviously, within this room, we want to make sure that everybody here is fully respected, but also any young people or students that you work with, that you don't identify anyone or that nobody could be easily identified. Respect is so important. We talk about it twice, so obviously respectful language, but we also ensure that we're learning from each other, we're being respectful of opinions and also people's identities too. Learning space is something that is really important, so we want to make sure that you go away with something today and that there is possibly, it could be an action or it could just be a thought that you think, something that you haven't ever questioned before. So hopefully we'll be able to get something that you can go away with today. I'll hand you back over to Kathleen.
Thanks, Michelle. So I am going to introduce you to a forthcoming report that we have coming out. So I am the research officer here at LGBT Youth Scotland, and I'm going to talk you through a big piece of research that we've done and some of the findings that we have this year in relation to education. And that'll take about 20 minutes. And afterwards, I'm going to pass back to Michelle, who's going to give you some practical steps that can be taken in educational settings that really respond to these findings. So if you've got any questions, do stick them in the chat as we go along, and we'll come to those towards the end. So first of all, let me talk to you about the research that we've carried out. What did we do and how did we do it? And most importantly, why did we do it? So this comes from a larger piece of research called Life in Scotland for LGBT Young People, which is a huge survey that we run every 5 years with young LGBTI people across Scotland. And when we're talking about young people, we work with people between the ages of 13 and 25. And they are invited to participate in this every 5 years. And it has grown each time that we've run it. This is the biggest sample that we've had so far. And we're now being able to really use the findings in a lot of the areas of our work. So youth work is at the heart of what we do, but there are other things that our research influences as well. Michelle's going to talk to you about our charter programme later, which is used in schools and other settings to help practitioners make sure that they're working inclusively of LGBTI young people. We also have over 90 volunteers that work with us across Scotland, and the research that we have with young people is used to influence their training to make sure that their practice is really responding to what young people need at the moment, to make sure it's accurate, that it is appropriate. We're also involved in policy and influencing, and our research is often used if we are responding to consultations, perhaps for the Scottish Government, and also working with other third sector organisations, other youth work organisations. We're able to share our research to make sure that any influencing going on brings young people's voices into the conversation. So the research itself was a large-scale mixed method survey. The questions that we've used some of the core questions since 2007, but each year we have reviewed them in partnership with other external organisations just to make sure that they're still relevant. It's 15 years, it's a long time. So this is the largest survey that we have undertaken so far. It covers a range of topics. We looked at sense of community, the experience of coming out, education, experiences within health services, media and representation, and other areas as well. And today I'm going to talk to you about the findings specifically about education, but at the end I'll also share with you the link for the full report. So if you want more information about other areas of the survey, you can go and find that. We had 1,279 participants. So as far as I'm aware, this is the largest piece of research that's been undertaken on this specific demographic to date. And each time we've run the survey, our sample has almost doubled. So in 2017, we had around 600 or 700 participants, and that has really increased this year. So it's a really, really big piece of work that I'm going to talk to you about. So that's the general context. We started off just by asking participants, would you say the experience for LGBTI young people in school, college and university is good, okay, or bad? And what we found was that in school, just 1 in 10 participants told us that the experience was good, which is obviously a fairly disappointing figure. But looking back 5 years ago at 2017, at that point, we found that around 1 in 10, the same sort of level, were telling us that the experience is good. So unfortunately, we're not seeing much change within the school experience over the last 5 years. We also asked college students, and what I'd like you to look at there is that the percentage telling us that the experience was bad for them as an LGBTI young person has almost doubled, moving from 5 to 9%. And unfortunately, again, in university, we found that the percentage telling us they had a good experience has dropped from 70% down to 56%. So across all the areas of education that we asked about, we found that there was still some work to be done. So to respond to this, we've developed this education report centering around some of the qualitative information that participants shared with us about their experience, what they found that the challenges were within education for them, and how they thought that this could be improved. So I'm going to talk you through 5 themes today. And I will talk you through the theme, what it means to the young people that responded, and then I'll hand over to Michelle for some recommendations that are also included within the report. So the 5 areas I'm going to talk to you about is supported staff across the institution, and that is educational staff and support staff as well. It was really important that everyone in the institution is involved in this inclusive work. We're going to talk about spaces being respectful and inclusive of LGBTI learners. The LGBTI-specific information is available to staff and to students, and those are 2 separate things, but both came through really strongly as being important. We're going to talk about the policies and guidance in place within an institution, and following on from that, staff then taking action on those policies and those procedures. So starting off with supportive staff. Within this area, there were a few things that young people told us that would really, really help feel more supported within education. First of all, having specific points of contact to go to. So these are specifically trained and knowledgeable staff members who are able to support students with LGBTI issues. This young person summed up really nicely. They said they'd like a clear point of contact for handling any issues related to sexuality or gender, such as bullying incidents. Queerphobic bullying is often quite a specific situation that requires sensitive handling, and I'm not confident that all teachers are equipped to deal with such situations. So what young people told us is they would like specific members of staff that they can identify, that if they would like to talk to you about an LGBTI issue, they can go and find that person. More broadly, however, they also made it clear that across the institution, staff being explicitly supportive and allies to the LGBTI community was really important. And this person here said that my guidance teacher and so many of the teachers I'm out to very much have my back, and that makes me feel really comfortable at school. So that is a more general, just being explicitly supportive and welcoming of LGBTI students within the institution from staff right the way across the board. Finally, lots of young people told us that role models, openly LGBTI staff within the institution was something they saw as really positive. This gave them a sense of solidarity, but it also was visible representation of hope for the future for themselves. And it was a really powerful thing that staff could do. Of course, this means that this institution needs to be a space where staff feel comfortable to be out to their colleagues, to their students, to their pupils. And that's something that we'll cover in a little bit more detail when we talk about the values and the culture of the institution. But that was a really positive step that young people told us that staff could take. When we're talking about supportive staff, we did ask participants, do you feel supported as an LGBTI person specifically? And here we found that a third of school students and 1 in 10 college and university students don't currently feel supported as an LGBTI person within their institution. So whilst there is some really good work going on, we did find that there is still some more work that could be done there. Following on from that, making the space respectful and inclusive had a few different factors. First of all, the use of respectful language was seen as something that staff could do to really indicate that a space was inclusive. And that is being up to date and aware of LGBTI terminology, that it's used accurately, and that it's used respectfully within the space. Other people told us that they would look for safe spaces, and these fell into 2 categories. Safe physical spaces, so some students talked about rainbow rooms where LGBTI clubs could go and meet. Some talked about there being posters and flags up within classrooms and within canteens to show that the space was supportive and welcoming for them. And also people talked about a psychologically safe space, that actually things that we talked about in the last theme that staff could do to make them feel welcomed and comfortable within the situation would also make the learning environment a safe space for them. Something else that they talked about was fostering an LGBTI community, and that's really finding opportunities for LGBTI students to meet, to work with each other, to share experiences and to support each other. And there's a number of different ways that you can do that. It could be something like an LGBTI society or group within your institution. This young person told us that at university, I joined a society specifically for LGBTQ people. And meeting people with similar experiences changed everything for me. I finally felt supported and like people around me understood what was happening to me. So these sort of things can have a really, really powerful effect on the experience a young person has. Finally, in this section, young people talked about openness and changing a culture so that it becomes more welcoming for them. And these are things like making sure that LGBTI experiences aren't thought of as taboo, that they're part of the fabric of everyday conversation, that you don't avoid addressing LGBTI relationships or issues within the space, so that it seems like something that is nice and easy to talk about. This person said, I think more talk about being queer should happen. I don't feel safe, mainly because people don't understand and would make assumptions that could end up affecting me. We should be taught about queer people and how to support someone if they are queer. So really utilizing queer experiences within the learning environment. We also found that having LGBTI-specific information was something that young people thought was really, really positive. So Scotland at the moment has LGBTI inclusive education, it's mandatory in schools. I think Michelle will be able to talk to you a little bit more about this, but making sure that LGBTI relationships, identities and experiences are represented within the curriculum was something that young people found really empowering. They found it something that made them feel part of the learning environment. However, we did ask at the moment, do you see LGBTI representation within the curriculum? And those orange bars in the middle are the percentage of participants that don't currently see this. So 69% of participants overall currently don't see LGBTI identities represented within the curriculum. So although this is beginning to be put into place in schools, it's still not quite filtering through. Not all young people are seeing this within their own experience. So that was a step that staff members could take. More specifically, sexual health and relationships education was an area where lots of young people told us that they were not receiving appropriate information. Some young people told us that this education was focused very heavily on pregnancy, on STIs, but actually the information that they received didn't align with their experience, and it left them without the information that they really needed to be confident in this area. Another form of information is not just for young people, but for staff to have access to information. So earlier on, I talked about staff being trained and knowledgeable to be able to support LGBTI learners. And actually, for people to be able to do that successfully and comfortably, there's got to be training in place. So making sure that your staff members have access to this training when they need it is something that can really filter through and support young people. And once you've done all this wonderful work putting that in place, make sure that you signpost young people to the fact that this exists and it's taking place. So this person really sums it up well. They said, I wish there was better information on where to seek help with LGBTI+ issues in college. Wellbeing team are often clueless, and all of my past learning and development tutors have simply pointed me in the direction of mental health services or LGBT Youth Scotland. And what I really needed was information on specific policies and maybe some sort of college-based community. So once you have these things in place, make sure you make learners aware of them and how to access those. When we're talking about policies and guidance, let's move on to that theme. There were a few different areas in which young people really felt that this could give them confidence. So things like name change procedures. If someone asks to be addressed in a different way, making sure that there's a procedure in place that makes this nice and easy for them to do can make young people feel really supported. And as this person points out, having trans-inclusive systems for names and gender records that actually work. Lots of young people told us that they were aware that these procedures were in place, but actually when they tried to have their information updated, they ended up having to out themselves multiple times, and that there was a lot of emotional labor involved in that. So making sure that when you've got a policy, you check it, you make sure that it works, that it functions, and it's accessible for the young person. Whilst you need to make sure that everyone is aware of these sort of things when they are changed, the flip side of this is confidentiality and making sure that young people aren't outed without you intending to out them or without their consent. For some young people, they said it wasn't safe for them to be out in every situation. So making sure that you ask their permission to share information before you do so is really important. This young person told us that the thing making me feel most safe at the moment is that they don't disclose my transgender identity. So making sure that you have a conversation with the young person and making sure that you are doing exactly what they need. Anti-bullying policies were something else that cropped up quite a lot within the survey. Young people felt that having a written policy that they knew in writing protected them from discrimination made them feel more confident within the learning environment. So again, having the policy in place and signposting young people towards that can make a big difference. And once you've got that policy in place, the final theme that came through really strongly was that of taking action. So this young person says that staff should actively embrace diversity and inclusivity, not just mark it to prove they are to the wider general public. So this is the idea of not just having a policy in place and then putting it in a filing cabinet, actually walking the talk, essentially. So following through on policies is a really important thing. So if you say to young people, it's going to be possible to update the way that you're addressed, make sure that when they ask you to change that, you follow through on it. This young person said they would like more representation and good standards of follow through on it. Don't just advertise it. Stick to the messages that you're trying to pursue. I talked earlier about making sure that LGBTI experiences aren't taboo, but Whilst that's happening, the person facilitating that, young people felt, should make sure that they're protected during discussion of LGBTI identities. So making sure that during discussion, language is appropriate, that no one's identity is up for debate, that they don't come away feeling invalidated by the experience. So there is a responsibility in breaking that taboo to make sure that the people affected by it aren't harmed by those discussions. And then finally in this section, where you see it, challenge homophobia, biphobia, and transphobia. A lot of young people told us that they had seen staff witness this type of discrimination and then choose not to engage and not to do anything about it. And the young people in the survey felt that this was not a neutral stance, that doing nothing wasn't neutral at all, that actually they felt that that condoned the behaviour and sort of endorsed the bullying behaviour and left them feeling invalidated by the experience. So making sure that if you see something, that you do something about it. I think that this came through really strongly because we also asked participants, do you feel confident reporting homophobia and biphobia or transphobia to staff or any other authority figure in your educational setting? Just a quarter of school pupils in our survey felt confident reporting this sort of behaviour, and under half of college and university students felt comfortable reporting this. Similar sort of thing for transphobia. Around a quarter of school students felt confident reporting this to staff, and under half of college and university students would feel confident. So this challenging homophobia, biphobia, and transphobia is really important because not all students are going to feel comfortable coming to you and asking you to do something about it. And actually leaving this unchecked can have a really big effect. We asked participants if due to homophobia, biphobia, or transphobia, they'd ever left education. And around 1 in 10 of our participants said, yes, I have left education due to this form of discrimination. And when we looked at this more closely by demographic, if you have a look at the bottom here, that rose to 1 in 5 neurodivergent students saying that they left education due to this form of homophobia, biphobia, or transphobia. So stepping in to challenge that is one of the most powerful things that you can do. It can really have an effect on someone's educational experience. So those are the 5 themes that we've come up with there. Staff being supportive, explicitly supportive, that learning spaces are respectful and inclusive. The LGBTI-specific information is available to both staff and to students. That policies and guidance that protect LGBTI young people are in place, and that staff take action and really follow through on those. So, as I say, I'm going to hand over to Michelle in just a second. If you would like more information, there's a QR code up there for our full Life in Scotland report. I will also put a link into the chat so you can access the PDF, and I can stick this back up again at the end so that you can get more information on that. But for now, what I'll do, Michelle, is I will stop talking finally, and I will hand across to you and stop sharing my screen.
Thank you so much. I set that up just now. There we go. Everyone can see that okay?
Yep.
Excellent. Okay. Firstly, full disclosure, I am a previous primary school head teacher, so I had put pictures in mine. It was just a habit of a lifetime. I apologise for that, but I couldn't help it. I had to put a picture in it somewhere just to go along with the themes. So thank you again for having us both along. It's been great to be able to meet so many people, and I'm really looking forward to the chat at the end. Hopefully we'll have some time for you to ask questions and to try and answer questions where possible. My task for this afternoon is to explain what the recommendations are, how schools and colleges, universities and education settings on the whole can take these recommendations forward. And I will talk a little bit about the LGBT Charter programme as well, which we do at LGBT Youth Scotland. Now, for context, we have been working in schools just over 20 years. And the reason why it's just over 20 years is due to Section 28 in Scotland was repealed in the year 2000. And from that point onwards, we have been working within schools and with schools to support young people and support LGBT staff within them also. We work with thousands of teachers each year and student teachers across Scotland, and we try to ensure that there are really inclusive programmes of work that are really robust, that schools, colleges, universities, all settings in general can go along with. Obviously, we have a whole organisational section to our charter as well. So there are lots of places that young people go on to world of work or into places that they would visit as service users. So we do have a broad spectrum of people that we work with. Currently, there are over 107 education settings in general that are working with us, and 31 out of 32 local authorities, which is a phenomenal number. As Kathleen has mentioned, there are 5 main themes from the Life in Scotland Education Report. There will be things I might touch on that Kathleen has already touched on as well, so I'll try not to overgo those ones. But hopefully you'll be able to take away some references to other programmes of work, like the Rights Respecting Schools, for those that are school-based practitioners that are here today. We've tried to align our charter and our programmes of work with other programmes of work so that there's equalities and diversity across the board, rather than it being just LGBT specific. Now, Kathleen spoke about supportive staff, and as you can see, there are 3 recommendations that we have come to the conclusion. And I say we, it was the young people that took part in the survey that highlighted these main recommendations, and as an organisation, we have written them to support educational facilities. So training is a huge part of what you can do to be a supportive staff member, whether that is taking part in LGBT training, whether that is turning up today to find out more about what the recommendations are. But by being more open to having continual professional learning around LGBT education, LGBT identities, LGBT awareness, anything that you can do to understand the national approach of LGBT education on a whole will be really helpful. And that's what young people want practitioners and school staff to know. They want to be able to go to those staff members and know that there's going to be an understanding of something that they might bring to them. Young people also asked for an inclusive culture and ethos. Now, that goes from the values that you have within a setting to how that looks in your school improvement plans, or if you have improvement plans on the whole. With schools, there is how good is our school document, and 3.1 is around ensuring wellbeing and inclusion is really high in your agenda for the year and 3 years that are there. But for the wider community, it's really important to get things right with the culture of your school anyway. And I think if you are talking about equalities, again, it's about all the protected characteristics, not just LGBT matters, but by having a really clear and open mind to how you become more inclusive as a school, having these difficult conversations with staff members or with service users or the community, parents, with students, with everybody that's part of the school community, it will then ensure that the ethos is a lot more inclusive one. Visibility, as we've mentioned before, is ensuring that young people can go to a staff member. That staff member has been trained, has knowledge in LGBT education, and is able to provide the right answers. Visibility in this aspect does not mean sticking up rainbow flags and rainbow lanyards. There 100% is a place for that, but when we discuss the charter later on, we'll understand that it's really important to get policies first and to get the culture of your school right before you start doing things like that. They are the fun parts to do in LGBT History Month or for Pride, and really support those things. However, it is about appropriateness and how to engage with all stakeholders before you start doing that kind of visibility aspect too. We also mentioned that respectful and inclusive spaces, these are kind of obvious ones. So by having an LGBTI group, you're providing a safe space for young people to get together, to have conversations. Please bear in mind, if you are in education settings, it's really important for staff who might need an LGBTI group also, or to be part of a community that they feel safe to be able to talk about their life too, because as a primary school teacher, I found it quite difficult to be out and open about my sexual identity when I was working in school. And I don't know if that was my uncomfortableness or I didn't feel like the culture was right in the school for me to be open and honest about who I was. So it is important to think that when we're talking about these things, it's for the young people and for the staff too. Physical spaces are really important as well. Young people suggested that it would be really important to them to make sure that there are lots of consultation opportunities. So if there are young people who identify as non-binary and they would like to have gender neutral changing facilities or toilet spaces or just spaces in general, that was a physical space. It was really important to have consultations with them about what their needs are, and not just to think, oh, well, they haven't asked, so we won't provide. It's about consulting as much as possible. Oh, sorry. LGBTI cultural calendar events. It's LGBT History Month, which you all know. There are opportunities right the way throughout the year for cultural calendar events that can be celebrated. And there are also events that we have as part of our calendar that are more difficult to discuss with young people, and it's because they have, you know, not everything that we celebrate is positive. And I think that as much as possible, we try to be positive in LGBT cultural events, but there are things like Trans Remembrance Day, which is really important to recognise within an education setting. However, it's about the work again around that. We're talking to perhaps primary school age children, or there might be a school or an education setting that may have potentially lost somebody who is a trans person, and it's about being really respectful of your space, knowing your community, knowing your student body and your staff body, and knowing what's appropriate and right for your education setting. The inclusive curriculum that we have is, as you know, the first in the whole world to have an LGBT education programme. The national approach, which is on lgbteducation.scot, is part of an implementation group with Scottish Government, which we're also part of, and Time for Inclusive Education are leading the way on the curriculum, and to be much more inclusive than it currently is. They're doing a fantastic job, and if you have access to that website, or if you have, I think you need to have a global email address to access that. There are loads of resources that schools can use. Some education settings as well, perhaps further or higher education, can use some of the resources and adapt to what's suitable for you. But it's about you can't be what you can't see. And when we're talking about simple things such as in primary one, instead of Janet and John going to get 5 apples at the shop, it's John and James go and get 5 apples at the shop. And it's little small changes that you can make to your curriculum, which will make a huge difference to someone who might be in your classroom, and about respecting and being a bit more inclusive about that. The sexual health and relationships education, Kathleen touched on earlier as well. Young people reported back that they did not have representation within their sex education, and the new policy that Scottish Government have released are the Relationships, Sexual Health and Parenthood programme. Now, there's still a long way to go on that, and I'm part of the working group with Scottish Government and Education Scotland and NHS boards across Scotland as well. There's lots on LGB education, but there's not so much about transgender identities and transgender people, and I think it's really important that we do a little bit more for that. So believe me when I say I'm still working on that, and I'm trying really hard to ensure that that is a little bit more up to date and current, in line with everything else. Signposting is something that's really important, as I mentioned earlier. It's about the whole community. It's about knowing what is there, what can be accessible by young people, and also the community as a whole. So if you are within a larger city or a rural area, making sure that your young people in your setting also get the same access to supports. So if you're I'm from the Highlands, so I can say this, but if you're in a far-flung place in the Highlands and you don't have access to a youth work group, or there's not an LGBT group within your college, university, school, wherever you are, what are your services that you should be directed to? So that would be the opportunity for you as an organisation to then be saying, okay, there's digital support here, or this is where you can get this charity, and this is what we're doing within our college or setting here. It's really important to make sure that's really clear. I don't know if people are using Teams more often, or if we've now got Teams fatigue or anything else, but it's trying to do it old school, stick a piece of paper up, QR codes, whatever you need to do to try and get the word out is really, really important, because young people need to know that. Obviously, we spoke about policies earlier on. Ensuring that your policies are in line with the Equalities Act 2010 will start you off really, really well. Make sure that all protected characteristics are there. I've seen many, many schools that have their inclusive policy that they seem to miss sexual orientation or gender reassignment. It's really important that all of the protected characteristics are in there. And if it means a conversation with the wider community, like parents, like the student body, with staff, have those conversations, because it's about inclusivity for all. Anti-bullying policies, we want to ensure that they're following the national approach for respect for all. That's the Scottish Government programme. However, some education settings call them promoting positive behaviour or relationships and behaviour. There's loads of different ways of saying it, but specifically the anti-bullying policy, and ensuring that when you're writing with these policies, that they talk about homophobic, biphobic, transphobic bullying, and not just bullying in general. It's about being really specific. If that means listing all of your protected characteristics, ensure that you try and do that too. Young people need to see it, like Kathleen said earlier on. They need to know it inside out and know that they can refer to that to ensure that they can get support too. If you haven't already read the Supporting Trans Young People in Schools guidance, it's a huge document. It's really detailed. However, I think that because it's so detailed and because it's such a large document, there's some bits that can be missed, or maybe you can't read it as intensively and put it straight into practice, because there are so many action points that come out of that document. So young people want you to use this if you're in an education setting. However, LGBT Youth Scotland have their own version of this. We've got specific training, we have specific guidance and kind of top tips to use as well. So again, we can signpost that at the end of the presentation today. Young people said it'd be great that you have policies, but we need to see them in practice. Now, again, that's nothing new. And when I've had conversations with young people, because we did consultations right across Scotland after the Life in Scotland report was created and launched. And when I spoke to young people, they would often say, so I would report homophobic bullying, but then nothing was done about it. Now, using my experience as a previous head teacher, I would suggest to the young people that things do happen and action is being taken. However, it's not always appropriate to feed back to that person that it happened to. Absolutely, there's parts that you should feed back, and you should ensure and reassure that young person that something is being done about it. But it's not always appropriate, because if you're using a restorative approach about how to support the person who's doing the bullying and how to take it seriously, it's really important that that young individual is being supported in the right way as well. We also asked young people about bullying in general, and the theme that came through is that they felt that they wanted to ensure that bullying was being recorded. Again, this was a little bit like the previous bullet point as well. So young people felt they're reporting things and nothing was being done about it. Now, I know myself, when I used to work in schools, I would worry about reporting bullying behaviours because I felt that it reflected badly on me and on my school. But that's totally the wrong thing to do. And I'm holding my hands up and I'm saying that, and I'm sure that there's lots of people that are in this room and also across Scotland and across the world as teachers or as practitioners that would probably feel the same. But it's really important that young people come to you and they report the incident, and that you record the incident and then you go on to action it. Because if the more you record, the more evidence that you have to suggest, hey, this is happening, so we need to do a little bit of education for here, or this is happening in this classroom, or this is happening within the playground, and looking at the different contexts that you have and how to support those young people, again, using a restorative approach and education around LGBT education. Now, it is hard and it doesn't look good when you feel like, oh my goodness, I've got about 30 reports this week. However, in the long run, the hope is that the more you record, the more that you action, use the restorative approach, that these numbers will come down. It's not a bad thing to record bullying instances, it's the right thing to do. Now, the LGBT Charter is something that we will go on to talk about just now, and that's something that we do specifically at LGBT Youth Scotland, and how that can help education settings and organisations to make a difference for our school. So on the whole, these are all the recommendations here. There are 15, there's quite a lot. I spoke at speed because we only have a short time today, and I would love to speak about each one of them in depth. So if you do have questions, please get in touch with me and we'll share our details at the end today as well. But I think if you can make some of these differences, and as we go through, you might have already been thinking, oh, I could easily do that, because that's something that can be done tomorrow. But there are other things that will take longer time, such as the policy work, if it isn't something that you're already doing. So bear in mind that this is a long time to do. And these are many recommendations that you're not going to be able to get done overnight, but the hope is that you'll try and get as much done as you can. So the LGBT Charter Programme, it is designed to ensure that organisations and schools are reviewing their policies, practice and resources to make sure that they're meeting legislative needs. But it's also to ensure that you're being as inclusive as possible. Now, being an LGBT Charter awardee allows you to obviously have a positive message to your pupils, your staff, your community, that your school or your education setting is a champion of inclusion. And also it's about making sure that young people feel safe. The whole point in the Charter was around safe spaces for young people. But this has evolved over the last 15 to 20 years. Now, normally it takes about 18 to 24 months to complete. And our job and our responsibility is to ensure that we support the education setting to make sure that you get through the Charter in the right way. Now, each school or each Charter client will be assigned an LGBT Charter manager, and that's from our organisation. And we normally manage to get most schools and education settings through at 18 months. However, colleges and universities love to get through 9 months. And I don't know why that is. It's just, they're like, we can get this done this year. We're going to get it done in 9 months. And most of the time they actually do. So it's exciting, but sometimes it scares me how quickly that they can action things when they're on a mission to do, but I respect it. Now, the LGBT Charter is done in a numbered way on purpose. Now, you'll see that we've got 1 to 6. There are 6 different areas that the Charter will cover. Now, what I was mentioning earlier was that some schools get so enthusiastic and some education settings get so enthusiastic that they're like, let's put rainbow flags up, let's do our lanyards, let's do our pins, our little pins. And we love that. We are here for that, obviously. However, if you don't do the work before, it can sometimes cause negative effects, because parents might say, why are we doing all this all of a sudden? Or young people might decide that there are more, young people might be provoked to start more challenging conversations that are not appropriate, and there isn't the education around that either. So what we try to do is the numbered approach. Getting your leadership right is getting a champion group put in place. That means your staff, pupils, and potentially parents, potentially community members. We've had a police officer in one of the schools that we're working with at the moment, which has been really effective. Scary when there's a police officer in the meeting as well, because I seem to want to be in my best behaviour, even though I've done nothing wrong. But it's always good to have community members that are part of the champion group. And this champion group will develop an action plan. Now, I always suggest it's really important, if it's a school, there's somebody in the leadership team, because if there isn't someone in the leadership team, it's often very difficult to look at policies or to look at the school improvement plan and to ensure that you're all going through, the whole school are going on this journey with you. My experience has been that it's 1 or 2 staff members who are really enthusiastic and really want to do the Charter that often do the majority of the work. And it's about a global approach, the whole kind of setting approach that's doing that. Next up, we would do the training, just as we mentioned with the recommendations. The training is provided by us. There is an online Moodle approach. I think Moodle's really, I think everybody knows what Moodle is now. I did not know what Moodle was until I started this job, but now I dream about Moodle. And Moodle is what we do first, and then we do a live interactive session to ensure that the action plan is specific to your setting as well. Then we look at policies. So you've had the awareness training, you understand more about what's the Charter and what LGBT education is. Then you're going to go into your policy work, and you're going to make sure that you're not doing that in a dark room on your own. You're making sure that you're part of your champion group, that is maybe wider. You decide to share it with the whole student body, or you decide to share it with the whole staff body, whatever you think is appropriate for your context, and do that. But make sure that these policies are shared, that they're consulted on, that you're listening to lots of different voices as well, and that they are as inclusive as possible. And again, ensuring they're in line with legalities as well. Next, you look at your practice. So you start then looking at, how do you celebrate being inclusive within your setting? Or how do you celebrate the Charter or your new policy, or the things that you're doing that are a bit different? I mean, there's one school that we're working with that found that, and this is common across schools in Scotland, that the accessible toilet will be used as the gender neutral toilet. Now then, young people were saying that then we're taking some support away from other students, and that's not fair. then we were talking about what an inclusive toilet would be. The next thing we knew, the English department had written a debate that they had sent to the leadership team. The leadership team then sent their response to the design team in the school, who then created a logo for what an accessible toilet, an inclusive toilet would look like. The design team then sent it to the art team. The art team then sent it to another team. And before you knew it, the whole school was involved in this approach, because it was about a global change that's happening within the setting. That's just one example, and that's just one example of practice. There's a lot more to the charter. Then you can do your visibility. If you want to have your rainbow lanyards, get them on. If you want your rainbow pins, get them on. If you want to paint your face rainbow for Pride Month, feel free to, but I'll pre-warn you that it takes a lot to get it off sometimes, and it stains your face. But the point is, you can get to visibility once you've done all these other bits, because the education is there, the support is there, and the reason for doing the visibility is there too. At the end, obviously, it wouldn't be an accreditation or a presentation if it didn't have an evaluation at the end. So we look at how the evaluation of the whole charter progress has been, the 18 months, but also we're monitoring the whole way through what students and learners' opinions are at the beginning, the baseline survey, then at the end, but also we try and touch base with young people all the way through. And that's when we find out if it's been by somebody who's sitting in the corner or the dark room doing it on their own. Because when you ask the young people, so what's changed in your school? And they say nothing, or they say, well, we've got this, we're doing this. It's really, really apparent that it's not a whole school approach and it's not being consulted with. So that's what we're looking for. That's what we're looking for excellent practice. It doesn't always work that way, because sometimes it runs out of steam, where there's not people in the leadership team, as I've mentioned, but it's important to make sure that we're reflecting on that at all. There are 4 different charters. We have the foundations approach, which we ask local authorities to do, because we believe that, for example, if it's in Highland Council, we would hope that the Highland Council as a whole, the education department, would do the foundations first to get the policies right at their level. And then when they disseminate the policies down to schools, schools can then contextualise it to the young people that are within their settings. So we ask for things like GDCS, also do the foundations approach, as do other education settings, which is really great as well, because Education Scotland, I keep pushing them to have one per department, but I think they're going to go for a global one as well. And education settings in the whole can do bronze, silver and gold. Now that depends on how much that you want to do. It might be that you want to just your toe in the water and start with the policy work, with the practice things, and then you would build up your accreditations over the 4 years if you wanted to. Being a primary school teacher, obviously I've put some pictures from what used to be in my classroom. There are so many books and there's so many resources out there. It's always wonderful to have different experiences for young people. If you haven't read And Tango Makes Three, just read it. Even if you are a 99-year-old person, it's a beautiful book and it's a true story. If you don't know what it's about, that's your challenge, your takeaway from me. If there has been nothing else, to buy that book or to read that book. So the core information for the charter is that it's done within a 1.5 to 2 years. It is a journey that you do, and it's a big piece of work that you want to have part of your improvement planning and your qualities work. There's advice and support from us at all times to ensure your policies are correct. It's fully in line with the LGBT Inclusive Education for Scotland, which is the Scottish Government national approach. It's fully inclusive of the Rights Respecting Schools programme and a few others as well. And there's consistent support from us at all times. It is a 4-year accreditation, so once you have got your charter mark, it stays with you for 4 years. We might come back and visit you if we want to at any point. It's always nice to revisit the schools, education settings too. But often what we find is as soon as somebody has got their accreditation, they want to go into silver, they want to go into gold. Again, we've spoken about why to take part, so I'm not going to jump into that because I'm very aware of time. If you haven't seen Heartstopper, it's on Netflix, just watch it. The episodes are 20 minutes long. I think there's maybe 8 to 10 episodes. If you don't know who the teacher is, Mr. AJ is one of the most wonderful human beings on the planet. And I know he's a character and I know he's not real. However, if you're looking at how to be an inclusive practitioner, he uses humour, he uses so many different inclusive strategies for young people or young LGBT peoples in his school. he provides a safe space for young people. I think that's all that we effectively want to do. We want to be able to, if we're doing the charter, if we're doing inclusivity work, if we're looking at our recommendations, the reason we're here today, or the reason that we're doing these things, is to make life better for young people within your setting. So again, if your other takeaway is other than by Untangle makes it easiest to watch Heartstopper, that's okay with me. Thank you very much. And you back to, I think, Kathleen.
Hi, yeah. Thank you. So I heard Kathleen, so the name, so I was kind of, is Kathleen saying something now? First of all, thank you so much, Michelle and Kathleen, for this talk and all the inspiration, the hard facts, but also the recommendations. And as you already said, there are quite a few there that, you know, depending on where you are with your school, you can pick to focus on one versus another. I would like to open the floor. I know we don't have many minutes left, but still I would like to open the floor for questions. You can ask questions in the chat, but you can also come on camera and ask your question here as well. I think I'm going to start with one looking at the LGBT Charter and all the training and the programs that you have outlined. What are the main challenges that you have experienced when schools want to contribute or want to, you know, engage in those programs? What maybe could help other schools deciding what would be the best charter category or how to approach the program as a whole?
So we always recommend getting in touch with us if you want to have a conversation about where your school currently is or your education setting currently is. Apologies for keep saying school, for me keep saying, I can't even speak now. Apologies for me saying school. It's just a habit, I'm afraid. But I definitely think have a conversation with us. We'll find out where your setting is, and it's normally most people start at bronze, but they find that actually they're doing a lot better than they expected to. So they jump to silver straight away. There is that flexibility. The biggest issue, as I mentioned before, is that sometimes people work on their own, or often, and I find this as well, I was the gay teacher in my school and I wanted to do the LGBT Charter to make life better for the younger version of me. And when you do it on your own, you then aren't going to be as impactful because you need a bigger audience, you need a bigger group of stakeholders, and it has to be really diverse as well. It's really important to have allies. And again, we talk about allies as a school and organisations. The allies are not just somebody who goes, yeah, I agree with that, that's great. It's somebody who actively challenges phobic behaviours and actively challenges things that are unsupportive of LGBT education. I'm seeing in the chat there about gender critical discourses. We are finding that there are conversations and perhaps press coverage and media coverage that are trickling into schools or education settings, and it's around having those conversations with the young people and having conversations with staff and just being open and honest. It's a very difficult environment for a young trans person or young non-binary person, in fact any trans or non-binary person at the moment on social media, specifically Twitter, though I have actually deactivated Twitter. But we suggest how to keep yourself safe, what's important, and just looking at the truth, and again, trolls and discussing what trolls are. And that's not just about gender, that's about everything, and being safe on social media. But it can be difficult, it can be challenging if you're having conversations with parents, specifically if you're in primary or secondary settings as well. And sometimes you will have a conversation with somebody, and if their view is this and your view is this, and that is where it's at, it's a very difficult. But at the end of the day, if you are a school teacher or if you're a practitioner, you have general teaching standards that you ensure that your professional values, your compassion, everything that you do as a practitioner or as a professional is in line with inclusivity. and equality for all. And it's really important to remember that equality is not a choice. It's, you know, it's a right for people to have, and it's important to remember that.
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry, I went on a bit of a rant there. I'm so
No, it's fine. You answered my question. It's great. Thank you. We have a question from Dustin. Dustin, do you want to ask on camera, or do you want me to read out your question?
Oh, I think it's just a. I think it was asked. It's just an extension of why I asked. I don't always know how to respond to these kind of things because being a gay man, it's hard to actually see some things and know how to respond to them. But I've seen it become more and more prominent on Twitter, and LSE has left Stonewall, from what I understand, as a result of the gender critical discourses. And so has, I think, UCL. And I think, at least from a colleague down south, she's very attuned. She used to work in politics, so she's really politically sensitive to what could happen. She's worried that the same might happen up here, that those discourses might influence what happens. And again, I don't know how, like, again, it's hard for me to say that gender critical equals transphobia because I don't know enough about it. But I can see how it is, because racism is racism when you see it. So I think that's why I was asking, how do we kind of step up? Because there are certain professors who are in big positions who may hold gender critical views. And if we're a student and we challenge that, it would be harder to kind of get that support, if that makes sense.
I do not have a magic wand to be able to give you the absolute answer, and I apologise for that because I wish I did. I wish I could take all the hurt away from young trans and non-binary people that are currently going to do what they're going through in schools at the moment, especially in colleges and universities as well, because I know that there will be views held by staff that are of a gender critical movement or of an anti-trans movement, sadly. And I think for me, it was always about bringing it back to the young person in front of you. What do they need? How can I support them? And how can I do right by them? And that's really easy for me to be here and say that, especially when there's lots of other external influences that are happening around you. And it's about appropriate challenging of the things that you know are right and wrong. It's very difficult just now. I think what's happening with things down south are different, but there are lots of similarities that are happening across the UK and across the world. But yeah, I think go back to the young person that's in front of you. How do you support them? How do you give them what they need? And how do you also protect yourself, especially as somebody from the community? I know that this has impacted on me hugely when I can see my trans colleagues or young trans people that I've worked with or I've taught, and I can see what the social media and the press media influence has done for them. It's really hard.
I suppose sort of the thing that came really strongly through in the research, so some of the most powerful stuff that young people did right was about sort of not the magic wand, not sorting it, but was these individual members of staff that made a difference within a system that was really quite difficult, but actually being able to go to someone and identify a safe space for a moment to go and be supported. That was something that people really appreciated. So, you know, it may not be a total fix, but there is a lot about just being an ally and being explicitly supportive that really, really resonated with young people and seemed to make a big difference. So hopefully that's helpful to remember that even that is a big thing.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions from the audience? No. I think I have one last question actually, and it's just when you were describing again about the LGBT Charter and the different programs, and I saw that on the one side it comes with different fees for it. And I was wondering, because I have been working with schools, and some schools have the budget for something like that, but some schools are very deprived and they won't necessarily have the budget for something like this. Is there any kind of funding that the school could apply for? They were interested to engage with the program, but don't really have the budget for it. Is there anything in place for that?
So I am single-handedly trying to annoy every single council and local authority in Scotland to try and get funding from the major budgets that they have centrally. And out of the 10 that I've annoyed this year so far, I've succeeded. So that's very positive. But there are, and again, because I'm from the Highlands, I have a real passion for the schools that are more rural that may not have the funding because of the size of the schools. I do think it's important to go back to your local authority and ask for funding, because they are very keen to support schools where possible. Contact me and I can annoy them for you if you don't want to do it personally. But also the LGBTeducation.scot website is entirely free. It's a Scottish Government initiative. It is the national approach, and it's a really good place to start if you don't have the funding for this year. And that's for everybody. I would certainly start there. And yeah, People Equity Fund is a possible source. That's what I used when I was in my school last year. So that was the fund I used. Again, it depends on the size of the school. It depends on your local authority. It would be a conversation that I can have with you in terms of there have been some schools that have self-funded. There are some schools that the parent council paid for it because they felt it was really important for the young people in their context. So we do support local authorities have a reduced fee. So just come and ask me and I'll annoy anyone you need to.
All right.
I can't say the same for colleges and universities, I'm afraid, because although most of the settings that I've spoken to have been more than happy to fund. So positive.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, if there are no other questions, I would like to thank you again, Michelle and Kathleen, for this fantastic talk and for sharing the data and recommendations and everything. I love the pictures, by the way, Michelle, so that's good. And yeah, thank you very much. And I will see you at the next TIA talk in March. Bye.